Thank you. So good morning, everyone. Tatsmewi. My name is Althea Walker. I am Nez Perce Hopi and Gila River and the Director of Community Resilience for the Climate Science Alliance. We are a nonprofit based out of San Diego. We've been around since 2015, founded by our Executive Director, Amber Paris. And we're thankful for this opportunity to be able to bring together partners, colleagues, friends from across the region for this opportunity for knowledge sharing, where we'll be hearing from 3 individuals with different backgrounds, experiences, and they'll be talking about foundation funding, federal funding, and state funding today. We thank you for joining us again and sharing your time with us. And just a little background of how this opportunity came about. It's been in different spaces and places with different individuals from across our various networks. But from the Palaban Mission Indians, the Sacred Places Institute for Indigenous Peoples, the Great Basin Tribal Alliance, the Center for Community, Energy, and Environmental Justice, and the Collaborative of Native Nations for Climate Transformation and Stewardship. All a mouthful, but it's great to be able to partner with these various organizations and networks to be able to talk about the different needs and priorities that are shared with us and be able to come together and provide opportunities like this one for those who are wishing to build capacity around climate resiliency. And so some of the things we'll be learning from our 3 instructors today, just understanding the basic fundamentals of grant writing around the foundation, federal and state funding, identifying the various funding sources and those requirements, how to put together strong proposals with clear objectives, and most importantly, ensuring that we're telling a compelling story as we are putting these proposals together. And I know when you registered, you shared your various experiences, you know, where we had a range from 0 experience to a lot of experience, but a lot of what was shared with us was that the no experience or some experience. So we're hoping, you know, to continue to spend time with you all in building that capacity around grant writing. And so we will move into introductions. Again, we have Elizabeth Cameron, who will be covering foundation funding, Cliff Banuelos, who will be covering federal funding, and Kurt Broz, who will be covering state funding. And before we get started today, I wanted each of them to provide the opportunity to introduce themselves to you, to find ways to relate to you, and just share a little bit about themselves, their background, their experience. Just noting that as each of them present, you will have a few minutes after they present to ask questions to them specifically before we move on to the next presentation. And so I will pass it over to Elizabeth to introduce yourself.
Thanks, Althea, and thanks everybody at Climate Science Alliance and Cliff and Kurt and all of you today. I'm so excited because like many of you, 10 years ago, I had no experience in grant writing, and I've been able to build a career doing something that I love and supporting organizations and causes that I really believe in. So my name's Elizabeth Cameron. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a non-native woman. So my ancestors come from the West Highlands of Alba, which is also known as Scotland. But I've been working in Indigenous advocacy, both personally and professionally, for almost 20 years. Actually, pretty much since I was 6 years old and found out about Columbus, I was like, this is some bully. So I've been educating myself and working in community for many years. I'm currently the Director of Development and Operations for Sacred Places Institute for Indigenous Peoples. And the bulk of my career has been working as in nonprofit development with Indigenous organizations as well as environmental organizations.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I will pass it over to Cliff.
So good morning, this is Clifford Banuelos. I'm the Tribal State Environmental Liaison with the Intertribal Council of Nevada, and also a member of the Tabuk Tribe of Western Shoshone. And so I've been in this position since 2017. I'm employed by the tribes, the 20 federally recognized tribes in Nevada, but I have a state office at the Nevada Division of Environmental Protection, and I've been there since 2017. Before that, I was the environmental director for the Elko Band Council in Elko, Nevada, part of my tribe. And before that, I was their transportation planner and grant writer. And before that, I was their environmental specialist for many years. So I've had 20 plus, maybe 25 plus years in the working in the environmental field and working with tribal governments.
Awesome. Thank you, Cliff. And Kurt.
Good morning. I'm Kurt Broz. I'm the environmental planner for the Paula Band of Mission Indians here in Southern California. I've been working for Paula for most of the last 12 years now, I guess. I've been working in the environmental field for 15-ish years since I finished grad school. My background is as a wildlife biologist, but I have since, as any of us who know working for tribal governments, small governments, I do a little bit of everything now in the environmental world. Climate change, wildfire prevention, whatever the tribe needs me to do, I'm here to do. And I love working here. And as far as like granting and the kind of stuff we'll be talking about today, you know, I was kind of thrown in once on a grant and I had to kind of learn as I was going, and I've been doing it since. Our office manages over 40 grants out of just our environmental department now. So we have a lot of granting experience under our belt over here at Paula, and hopefully we can share it with you.
Thank you, Kurt. And before we pass this back over to Elizabeth, if you have any questions in the chat box, you can send them directly to myself or to Naya with Luna, and we'll make sure those questions get to the presenter. So Elizabeth, it's all yours.
Thanks, Althea. Yeah, I just have to reiterate how exciting it is for me to be asked to co-host this today. Because like I said, I had no experience a little over 10 years ago, and I heard of these things called grants when I was finishing college, and I was so excited to tell the different folks I was working with at different Indigenous organizations. And I basically got to, like Kurt, learn the job on the job. And I'm really thankful for some wonderful people that have helped me, you know, build that career in grant writing. So I'm excited to share everything with you today. I'm going to start from some really basic. So what is a grant? A grant is a sum of money that does not need to be paid back as long as the funds are spent according to the terms of the grant agreement. And grants can be restricted. So think of that in terms of, you know, a specific project, a specific piece of equipment, or a specific program, or they can be unrestricted, which is generally general operating support. There are some distinctions between unrestricted support and general operating support, but we won't get into that today. That's pretty finite details. In general terms, you can just think of them as restricted or unrestricted. And then there's two types of grants. There's foundation grants, and then there's government grants, which includes the state funding as well. Foundation grants can be funded either privately. So let's say the Kellogg Foundation, Mr. Kellogg donated a huge sum of money to create a foundation to support his areas of interest and concern. So it's privately funded. They're not out doing any fundraising activities or asking the public, you know, for money. And then there's public foundations. An example of that would be like the San Diego Community Foundation. So they are involved in publicly raising money through fundraisers, and just, you know, in general, anybody can donate to that foundation and have that money go towards something that they're passionate about. And then just a note about writing skills. If you're here today and you are not a confident writer, or you don't have a strong, you know, skills in writing, I definitely encourage you to look at some free tools. You know, we live in this digital era, so it's great that there's so many free things at our fingertips. And just like everything in life, practice, patience, persistence, right? That's how we get better at things. So if you're charged with grant writing, but you're like not really confident about your writing, no worries. I've put some links in the handout that'll go after the recording for some free tools on that. And yeah, definitely even advanced, like I'm always trying to become a better writer as well. So there's always something to learn. Also using grammar software. I just started using Grammarly like a year ago, and I'm so in love with it. It, you know, it's not a replacement for having, you know, some strong writing skills, but it definitely helps you really get things concise and kind of catches things that your eyes may not always see. And then just reading. If you want to be a better writer, read more. That's another really easy tool to improve that. So what is foundation funding? So as I mentioned, foundations are private or public. They can be nonprofit organizations themselves, or they can be what we think of as charities, charitable trusts. And like I said, a private foundation can be funded by an individual, by a family, or even a corporation. You think of like PG&E, they have their own, you know, foundation. And then those public foundations are going to receive money from various sources. So I gave an example, the Kellogg Foundation. Another example is that's for a private foundation. And then a public foundation would be like your community foundation. A lot of foundations are public. And then I'm actually going to use the Kellogg Foundation. I'm going to screen share, and I'm going to go over kind of what I'm looking at when I find a funder. What are those key points I'm looking at to see if it's going to be a good fit? So this is going to be a real life example, going on their website, doing what I do every day. So let me pull this up. All right. Can everybody see this screen? It should say our people. Thank you. Okay, so here we are at the Kellogg Foundation. I selected this one because everything is really easy to find here. One of my pet peeves is when I go on a website and I can't find your mission statement within like 5 seconds. I get a little bit irritated about that. So I love that it's very easy to find. They have their menu, focus areas, grants, about. So that's the first thing I'm going to look for. I want to know, are we mission aligned, right? So typically it'll either be on their homepage or it's going to be in the about section. So we'll scroll down. Who are we? That's probably the one. Sometimes you have to do a little digging. So here we go. Mission. Perfect. So they support children, families, communities, achieve success, community, society. Okay. Kind of did a quick read there, but so if that sounds like the right fit for your organization, you're already mission aligned. That's your first thing. The next thing I'm going to look at is their focus areas. And just another note about mission alignment. So a foundation can be a long-term, multi-year support. The stronger, the more aligned you are with their mission, the more you're going to have a long-term partnership, which is a really good thing. We want that continuous source of income, right? And then they'll also are more likely to connect you with other like-minded funders. You know, funders have these things called funders conferences or covenings. All the funders get together. That's where you want to be. You want your name being tossed around at those parties for sure. So next thing I'm looking at is focus areas or priorities of the foundation. So they're going to let me know, what do they fund? So we know they love kids, they love families, trying to build a, you know, healthy society. And then they get more specific in that area. So, okay, good jobs, early childhood, early care and education. Okay, sounds like that might be the right fit. And then I'm going to look at, where do they fund? So geographic area, where we work. Perfect. This is why I selected them. I love their website. It's very clean. So now we're getting to the nitty gritty. Okay, where do they work? Throughout the US, also with tribes. And then they also have some work in Mexico and in Haiti. Okay, cool. That sounds like a good fit for my imaginary organization. And then I'm going to look at eligibility, if they have that, or it might be under, you know, grant supported activities. So probably at this point, I'm going to go take a look. Okay, they have a grant page. Awesome. Grant seekers. That's us. We want the monies. So they have kind of a different way that they have things set up. So they're really clear. They're like, are we a match? You know, it's kind of like a dating profile, right? You're like, is this the right fit? Is this going to be a long-term relationship, right? So I really like that they're very clear about that. Here they go. They say, where do we fund, what we don't fund? So that's also going to be part of that grant supported activities and eligibility. Let's say you were looking to, I don't know, do a campaign, you want to like build a new building for your organization, for the community you serve, maybe they don't do that at all. Some of them are very specific. You know, they might say, we support children in the United States and education, but then when you get down to what they support, maybe the only thing they support is school supplies, you know, like something really specific. So it's important to read all those areas. Then I'm also going to take a look at who have they funded in the past. So they have a super clear database. So you can scroll in. They have a lovely map. And then, I don't know, I'll just pick this one. So Second Chance, it'll tell you how much they funded. Sometimes, so every website is different. Every foundation is different, but this one is really clear. They're saying they gave 300,000 and it was in the equitable communities focus area. So good to know. So if you're looking for other organizations that do similar work that you do and see if maybe they funded something like that in the past. And then hopefully you can find out how much money they gave them as well. That's always helpful. And then another note, as far as like grant supported activities, I just want to make a note about lobbying. Most foundations do not support lobbying, but there are some that do. And I just think it's really critical that we talk about this more as nonprofit organizations. Lobbying is protected under federal law for nonprofit organizations. However, there's really particular terms that you're able to do lobbying. So influencing legislation, you know, having your organization influencing legislators or supporting certain propositions. So I added some details on the handout about that specifically, because I think it's really important for us to be thinking strategically about that and knowing that it is one of our rights. It's not something you can do full time. You know, it can't be a substantial amount of the work that you do, but it is protected. And just a side note about that, I think a lot of the work we do in nonprofit organizations is connected to outdated policies and racist laws. And so I think it's really important that we look at that picture strategically and think about how we can be using our resources to make that bigger change, right? Instead of just consistently fighting that thing over and over again. So that's my pitch about lobbying. So researching our foundation funding. So how do we find the right match? So I love Candid. It used to be called the Foundation Center. Oh, sorry, I'm going to go back. Sorry about that. I'm always going to tell people, start with your local community foundation. So if you work in everybody has work in a certain area, right? It may not be in your local community, but it's somewhere, right? So wherever your work is happening, find out who your local community foundation is and make them your best friends. The reason is they are there to support that specific geographic area. That's where the most of their money has to go, if not all of it. And they're also just a really good resource to have. They often have free trainings for everything you can think of in your nonprofit world. So that would definitely be my first thing. I want them to know who I am. I want them to know the work that we're doing, right? I want to just, use them as much as possible because that's what they're there for. And that's kind of where I always like to start. I really want to find out who are the foundations in that geographic area that I'm working in, right? So another really cool one I found, and I'm embarrassed to say, I can't remember how I found this. I think I was looking under grant making or nonprofit association, something like that. And I thought this was such a great gem. It's the Nonprofit Philanthropy North County Philanthropy Council. And what I love about this is under their resources page or their grants page, sorry, they have some featured grants. They have a list of federal grants, which Cliff will talk to you more about how you're going to research that, as well as state grants. Kurt will cover that section. And then we have local grants. And I just thought this was such a wonderful opportunity to look at who are the foundations working in the area. So you have this list of everybody that's offering grants, specifically in San Diego. So it's your San Diego foundations, San Diego organizations. So that's really where I like to start. I like to start as local as possible, just like a general fundraising tool. You want the community to know who you are and the work you're doing. Like, it is super important, no matter where you are, I work remotely now, but when I worked locally in my area, I was out and about all the time, giving presentations, going to Rotary Club, meeting with legislators. Like, they knew who we were, right? That was so important. It was so critical for that work, and to really celebrate the work you do, right? And so, sorry, it's always hard for me to just talk about one thing with nonprofits and fundraising, because my mind's like, oh, and you should do this. So yeah, you know, you want to be thinking about, like, can I get an interview on a local radio? Can I get in a news article, right? Like, all those things are going to build your fundraising base and build your street cred, you know, as a nonprofit, and just really good things to have, you know, in your back pocket. So we've looked at our local community foundation. We've done some snooping around, or like, what are the other local foundations, people that give in the area. So now I'm going to talk about Candid. So Candid has a wonderful, they have both paid and free resources. So this one is basically, it's a foundation directory, but you can sign up for a free newsletter that'll send you like a whole bunch. Yeah, thank you for putting that in the chat. You can sign up for a free newsletter, and every month they'll send you a whole laundry list of requests for proposals across the board. So across regions and across, you know, different types, different focus areas. I can't remember if you can make it more specific. It's been a long time since I signed up, but I really appreciate it, because I never know like who I might be helping, you know, with, I have my full-time job, but then I volunteer and kind of support other folks. So it's good to kind of see a broad base of that. So they do have that free tool. And then they also have a paid service with the foundation directory online, but they have, it can be accessed for free at certain locations, including some public libraries. So I put a link for that in the handout as well. I live in a rural area, so like none of this is near me at all, like within several hours. But if it is accessible to you, I definitely suggest that you do some snooping around. You have to be really specific and kind of play around with the keywords, because it's going to give you everything. And the thing is, not every foundation has a website. There's a lot that are still old school. Send them a written proposal, and then they will send you a magic check. Like, it's just crazy how many foundations are out there, and they're not all online. So definitely worth playing around with that foundation directory and see what you can find. And then another shout out to Candid, because they also have a number of free courses, including grant writing courses. So I just can't say enough good things about them. It's a wonderful tool. So another way to research foundations is to actually look on foundations websites. They usually have a resource page. And I gave the example of First Nations Development Institute. On their resource page, they have a whole range of things for nonprofits, and they have a whole section for grant seekers. So connecting you with other organizations or search, you know, databases. And then GuideStar, I just found out, it's been a while since I've been on GuideStar, but I just found out they're part of Candid as well. So Candid kind of like took over the whole directory of foundations. And what GuideStar is, that's where all of your 990s get automatically populated into GuideStar as a nonprofit. So you can research how much foundations, how much they have in their assets, how much they're giving out each year. 990s is a whole thing. It's a whole different way of looking at how foundations and nonprofits operate. There's a whole separate workshop there, you know, understanding 990s. But it's a really good tool when you're making those connections. I always want to know how much money do they have? How much money are they giving out? And then a little thing with foundations is they only have to give out 5% of their assets every year. So it's a little different. So they may have, you know, $10 million, whatever, but they only have to, the law says they only have to give out 5% every year. So interesting, fun facts, fun foundation facts. And then Google, like, there's nothing wrong with it doing a Google search. Like, if you work with unhoused youth in San Diego County and you're looking for grants, like, throw that in there, throw in the topic, what you do, the geographic area, and then grants, and then you'll get something. It can be overwhelming, but you never know what you can find. There's nothing wrong with a Google search. And then there's some paid services, more paid services. I haven't used these in a while. I only put up ones that I've used in the past, which is GrantWatch. What I like about them is they have like an $18 a week program, where some of these it's like $200 a month, right? So I like that they're, you know, kind of on the lower base. And sometimes you can even cross-reference, like you can copy and paste and then kind of find the grant without paying for it. Just kind of depends on how much time you have, how much you want to invest in that. So we found the right fit. We found a foundation with an open grant process. So what is the proposal process with foundation? So I hate to tell you this, but every application is going to be different. I mean, I wish there was just like a common, you know, template I could give you. There's common categories and questions, but unfortunately each one's going to be different. Some might be really general, and then some they're going to be like really specific, like tell us again, how are you getting youth to the coast and outdoor education? Like every single question is like going back to this, like whatever their focus is on the grant or at the foundation. So there's going to be either a request for proposals or grant application, or a letter of interest, also known as a letter of intent. Think of your LOI, your letter of interest is like your introduction, and they're kind of screening you, like, are you the right fit for this application? And then if you pass that, then they will send you, allow you to apply for a full proposal. So it's a two process. I've seen everything when it comes to LOIs. I've seen multiple pages, you know, it feels like a full length application. And I've seen ones that are like a paragraph, you know, so it's just, it's really varied. There's going to be word limits and there's going to be character limits. So just make sure you're counting that, you know, tracking that as you go along in your application. And think, you know, you just have to be really concise and strategic. And if you're getting stuck, you're like, I have so much to say and they only are giving me like this much, look at the other questions and kind of think about it strategically, even like create, you know, do like on a whiteboard with like a bubble with the different categories. So you can kind of figure out how can I streamline my answers and be as concise as possible, right? Because sometimes we end up kind of talking about multiple categories at once, you know, it's just kind of how our brains think. And then they're kind of giving us a different way of like separating things. And then I'm just going to give you, this is like my, every single grant application, I do this. I always work in Google Docs. I'm just of that generation, I guess. And as soon as I find the right fit, find the grant application, we're going to apply, have the green light. I start a Google Doc and I just have all the information right there. So the name of the grant, the link, when it's due, how much money, what's the login information? Because oftentimes you will have to create a username and password to log in to get the information. Then I will copy and paste all the application questions, all the required materials, and then that's what I work off and, you know, share with other people on the team. That's my magic. I don't know if that's helpful for anyone, but that's what I like to do. When you work with government grants, it's very different. They send you the materials, like they want you to use this specific Word document and this spreadsheet, and it's like a whole separate thing. I don't as often see that with foundation grants. Occasionally they give you like, here's our Word document. We want you to complete this specific document. Usually it's a portal or you submit them, you know, your own proposal. So because they don't have, you know, there isn't this common grant application, I just remind people to always think in terms of who, what, why, when, where, and how. If you can answer those questions about your organization or about the project that you're trying to get funding for, you will pretty much have the base for any foundation, you know, grant application that you come across. So who are you? What are you doing? Why are you doing it? When are you doing it? Where are you doing it? How are you doing it? So think about all of that as you're, you know, whether you're doing an application or you just or want to get a head start on things and kind of have a strong case statement for your org. Some common questions that you will see though is a title of your project, brief description of the project or how the money will be spent. They're always going to ask you about your mission, your history, your past accomplishments, your current programs and projects. And again, that can be general or it can be really specific. Like, what is that project you're doing with unhoused youth in San Diego County? Like specific, right? And then goals and vision, same thing, can be very broad or it can be very specific, only related to that one thing that they're focused on. A description of the community served or the problem to be solved. Why is your organization best positioned to do this work? So explaining kind of your credentials and the experience that you have, the successes that you've had. Theory of change. So this used to scare the hell out of me. And I've been to many conferences and went on the theory of change workshop and came out even more confused. But the way I explain it is theory of change is what are the things you're doing to create the change you want to see, right? So if I'm trying to end homelessness, then I am working with unhoused youth in San Diego County and giving them the skills that they need to be successful in that, in that world. And that's the things I'm doing to create the change I want to see. So that's my trick with theory of change. Evaluation. So how do you know what you are doing will work or is working? Evaluation can be qualitative and quantitative. And so it's just something to kind of reflect upon. Sometimes that can be the hardest thing for people to talk about when they're proposing a project in a grant application. They're like, oh, how do we know this is working? What are our evaluation tools? So just keeping that in mind. Who are your partners? And then how do you work together with your partners? And then this is becoming more common. You're going to see questions about justice, equity, diversion and inclusion, and racial justice, racial equity. So how does your organization support that? What is your organization doing to support JEDI? And then a note on case statements and need statements. So if you don't have a case statement for your organization, you need one. It's like going to be your best friend when you write grant proposals, because you can copy and paste from these things. And that's just coming back to that who, what, when, where, why, how. It's, it's going to cover a lot of those things that I just talked about, those basic kind of common grant application questions. But it's really important because you have an opportunity to tell your story, to compile data, and to add program costs, and then to celebrate your successes. So I love a really beautiful, vibrant case statement. It doesn't need to be a magazine. I mean, it can be a few pages, but I love showing pictures, just something that's more eye-catching, but also has a description of, who we are, why we're doing what we do, how we do it, what our successes are, and then the different ways that people can support. And this can be used as a supplemental material. This can be used as an introduction to a foundation to help introduce yourselves when you're working with a program officer. And then same thing for a need statement. Like, we all have projects, we all have programs. I think those deserve, it depends on how much work you do. My organization has like 9 programs, and then within that, they've got a million projects. So I think it is important to develop, even a couple page need statements for specific things that you're trying to fund, either one time or year after year, and then including those costs in there. Like, it's really powerful if a foundation can see we need $50,000 and we're going to end this, we're going to fix this problem. They love seeing that type of empirical data, and to really know, okay, where's the money going and how is it going to make that change, and it's going to make that long lasting change. And then another super nerdy thing I do is I create a document when I start working with an organization. I call it my general grant answers. I don't know if y'all have a better name for it, but that's just what I call it. This is going to be your super basic information that you are going to copy and paste every single time you are writing an application. So it's going to have, just the general stuff, your org's name, address, who's the ED, who signs the contracts, what year were you founded, your EIN number, your tax ID number, how many staff do you have, where do you work, like geographic area, your mission, your vision statement, and your current funders. And just a note about current funders, when you are applying for a new foundation, it's important to share who your funders are, because oftentimes they'll see that as like, oh, okay, they're funding, they trust this organization, they're investing in them, they're partners, so I should too. It kind of gives them that like green light. It's like a stamp of approval. So if you have a bigger name funder, it's always important to add that in. And even if, it's just your local community foundation, put that in there. They want to see that who you're getting your money from, and that tells them kind of, what level you're at. And as far as your connections and your partnerships, right? And then they're always going to ask for a budget. They may provide you with a template, they may not, but obviously we should all have budgets anyways, right? Our own budgets, our internal budgets, and then something that's more concise that we can share out. So there's an organizational budget, and then there's going to typically be a project budget if it's for restricted support. And then big shout out to Lacey Cannon of Indigenous Regeneration. She just reminded me of this trick a few months. I think it's been a few months since we met, but she likes to start with the budget, and then that helps her build the proposal. So I just put that note in there. You know, if you're feeling stuck with the proposal questions, start with your budget, right? Follow the money. So if you know the thing you really need is 3 new teachers and a new building, start with your budget, and then that's going to give you the answers that you need to build that proposal. So it's all circling back. It's all coming back to that theory of change. Why do we need 3 teachers in a new school? Because we're going to end homelessness for unhoused youth in San Diego County. And this is how we're going to do it. And this is why we need these tools, right? So kind of all bringing it back. And then they're going to ask for other required documents. Again, it varies, but typically that's going to be a financial statement. And that can vary as well. Sometimes they just want your most recent profit and loss statement. Sometimes they want audited 990s. It really depends. They'll typically ask for a list of your board members and your staff and your tax determination letter. And then finally, if they have an opportunity for you to share supplemental materials, that's really important to do as well. So again, you're telling your story, you're showing your success rate, you're giving them hopefully a visual, maybe even a video. People, you know, kind of digest those things better, I think. So I just gave some examples. You know, it could be a article in the newspaper, it could be some data that you generated, or a report, a newsletter, and then also letters of support is really powerful as well. And then I forgot to mention, when we're building our grant proposal, another trick that I have is, oh, actually, this is my next note. Sorry. Never mind. Wait for it. I'll get right there. So some tips I've learned over the year. Whenever possible, you want to connect with that program officer or the contact for the grant application as soon as possible. Introduce yourself. If you have a case statement, you know, you can send them something. But at least just be able to pitch your project in a couple sentences and ask if they think it would be a good fit. And then the best is you say, oh, and would you, if they say yes, oh, would you mind reviewing my application before I submit it? That is super powerful. That is really awesome. If you can get them to review it, that's what you want for sure. And a lot of foundations, they actually, I find the bigger the foundation, like the more they do that. It's very interesting once you get kind of into the big scale funding. They're like, you've been invited and we're going to work with you every step of the way until it gets to the board of directors. So it's very fascinating, kind of that trajectory. And then, yeah, this is the note I thought I forgot. You always want to be framing your responses in the grant application back to their focus areas or their priorities of the grant application. So that's something else I will copy and paste and put in that grant application Google Doc, like at the top of the list. So as I'm going through things, okay, yeah, we're talking about our program for Native youth and climate resiliency, but really all they care about is getting youth outside. That's the focus of this grant. So how am I going to keep bringing that up? Like, oh yes, and we're getting youth outside and this is how we're doing it. And yes, this is why it's in alignment. So keep circling back to that. Don't, you know, just like use their words verbatim. You know, you can play around with it a little bit, but definitely make sure you're coming back and reminding them, oh yeah, they're doing that thing that we want to support, right? Reviewing your proposals. If possible, you get somebody to read it that doesn't know a lot about the work you do or the project. This is hard for us internally because we're tunnel vision, we're in the mix, right? So if you can, you know, get your partner, or your best friend, or your mom, or somebody, if you can get them, that's the best, because if they don't understand it, neither is the funder's not going to understand it either, right? So you need somebody that's not as close to the work as you are to be able to look and say, oh yeah, that makes sense, right? And then a trick I've learned, if you don't have a buddy to review it, or you just want to give it, you know, a good final review, just read it out loud. That really helps us catch things. When we're reading, our brain tricks us. And it's like, oh yeah, that word is there because I was thinking it, or I know it's supposed to be there. But when we read something out loud, we'll catch those mistakes a little bit better. Staying connected once you get a grant award. So I think this is super important. They're not ATMs, right? Like they don't want to just be hit up. Maybe they don't, I don't know. But I like to treat my foundation partners kind of like I would treat a donor, just an individual donor. Like I want to reach out to them. I want to send them our newsletter or send them a video we did or an article, like stay connected with them. Don't overwhelm them, but right, like maybe a couple times a year, just like, hey, I was just thinking about your project. You got funded and thank you for your support. And, you know, looking forward to submitting the grant report, anything to keep them on your radar. These people are well connected most of the time, right? So they're not just they're not just helping you get support with their foundation. Like I said in the beginning, they can connect you with other like-minded funders. They can invite you to that funders party that they're going to have in San Diego for all the funders that fund San Diego, right? So you want to be thinking about that. How can we be best friends? And then, yeah, stay connected, think ahead. So you're going to have a grant report that's due. You're going to have, you know, renewal funding, you know, new applications that come up. So make sure that you're tracking that. And that you're also thinking about how do they want to be acknowledged. So the funder is going to outline that in the grant agreement letter. They may say, you know, make sure you acknowledge us with our logo and this very specific sentence about the Kellogg Foundation. You know, it can be really specific, or they may not really have, you know, much, you know, terms around that, but make sure you are looking at the grant acknowledgement terms. And then stay organized. I know often when we're up against a deadline for a grant and we're overwhelmed, we just want to like, put that computer away when we're done, but don't do that. Make sure you start, you know, when you start that Google Doc that has all that grant application information, I would be starting another file that's like, I have my applied grants, my award grants, and my denied grants. And that's going to go right into the applied file. And then hopefully I put it into the awarded file. But keeping all those materials together, the budgets, you know, if there's really specific other requirements or supplemental materials, staying really organized with your files, because you're going to, once you have a good grant proposal, like for a specific project or for your org in general, you get to copy and paste that stuff. Like, I don't know how grant writers did it with typewriters. I could not do that way. Like, I copy and paste, I revise, I edit. But at least I always have that prompt. And then some stuff, it's not going to change that much, right? Like you're describing your program or you're describing your past accomplishments. You might update it, you know, year to year or whenever, you know, something amazing happens. But yeah, definitely going to be a lot of, there's copying and pasting is going to be your best friend. And once you kind of know where the different proposals are in your files, like, okay, we're doing Native youth in San Diego and climate resiliency. Oh, okay. I remember Kellogg Foundation had an application that was only about that. So now I can repurpose that with this, you know, whatever Foundation A that has a similar focus in their grant application. And then also just tracking, you know, in a spreadsheet, you know, your list of potential funders, your list of grants that you've applied for. What is the status of that application? When do you get the award? You know, what's the award date? What's the timeline of the grant? Having all that. You know, the more organized you can be, the better your life will be. And then, you know, just even using calendar updates for, you know, calendar invitations for applications or grant reports really helps you stay on track of this, because there's a lot of grants out there. There's a lot to keep track of. And then my final note, and I don't know if this is just something I tell myself over the years, but I really believe that there's no such thing as a wasted proposal. As long as it's a project that you are committed to doing, you can reuse it. So even if you didn't get the application or you didn't get the award, like I said, you file it away, you know where those kind of different types of applications are in your files, and you can repurpose it. So that's always what I tell myself. I wrote a good proposal. I can always, you know, use this information for a new application. And yeah, those are my tips and tricks. And please let me know if you have any questions.
Yeah, any question? Thank you, Elizabeth. A wealth of knowledge. I've learned a lot today, and I thank you for sharing. Any questions for Elizabeth before we move over to Cliff? And if there's something that pops to mind, always feel free to message and we can get the question to Elizabeth, but Kelsey Jensen, we have your hand up, Kelsey?
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Elizabeth. You have so much knowledge. I appreciate it. What if you're an introvert? I don't.
You mean, oh, sorry, was that your question?
Yeah, my question is like, what if you're an introvert and you want to go for all these monies and maybe you find another person who can do the outreach or
I mean, I think if you're an introvert, grant writing might be your jam as far as fundraising, because you're typically behind the screen using emails. It varies. Sometimes you might have a meeting with a funder, but you're not going to be like, you don't have to go out and do presentations if you're a grant writer. That was like a side note, because I'm always thinking in broad terms of nonprofit development or fundraising, and grants is one of many ways that we get money to support the work we do. So you do not have to do a presentation. I think, yeah, if you're an introvert, then grant writing is definitely going to be up your alley. And most of the time you're not going to have face-to-face, or the face-to-face might be the executive director of your organization or somebody else, maybe a board member that meets with the funder, and you're the one that's writing that awesome stuff. So you can be an extrovert through your writing. You don't have to be it like in person.
all right, thanks.
Thank you, Kelsey. Jane?
Hi, Elizabeth, I just have to tell you, first off, that was awesome. I had no idea all that went into grants. So thank you for all that information, and whoever's putting the links in there, thank you. I bookmarked them all. So I just want to affirm you that this is really important, what you're teaching today. So my question is this possible to do alone? Like one person? It seems like such a Leviathan of, Goliath of, I don't see how one person can do a grant writing for an organization, but that's what I'm asking you about.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think my hope is that it looks overwhelming because I'm giving you like everything I can possibly think of at once. But hopefully when you see the handout, it's kind of outlined like, okay, so you found the right application. This is your next step. And hopefully it'll flow easier for you, because you'll see it how it's outlined. I mean, I've most of the positions I've been in, I've not only done the grant writing, I've also done all the fundraising, or been the executive director and done all the fundraising. So it's definitely possible, but I think, stay organized. Don't put so much pressure on yourself. Like, start with that local community foundation. Start with a local foundation that has a track record giving money. The Rotary Club, that's another example of like a local organization that gives money. But yeah, I think you can totally do it. And building that case statement, building your need statements, you can do all that before you find the right application or the right foundation. And then you're going to have a lot of that information, and you can just copy and paste it and edit it as needed.
Right. And in addition to that, if you're brand new at this, like if you're starting a brand new organization, I wonder, will people even want to give you funding if you branch off and do something else? Like if you've got no one to show in your pocket, yeah, these people have helped in the past. So could you speak to that really quick for the new?
Yeah, I think that, the power is in the work you do, not the people that fund you. So I think that's where you have to remember, like, everybody on this call here today does something that nobody else in this world is doing. Right? That's why we're here. That's why we created a specific type of nonprofit or a specific program to do that thing. Right? So, believe in yourself. Oftentimes, our new nonprofits are all volunteers with no experience in the industry, which is kind of like the irony of the work we do. But, volunteer hours is a thing. Track that. Track how many volunteer hours are going in. Track like the most minute things, like, all of those are successes. All of those. I didn't mean to say that funders won't give you money if you haven't been funded by anybody else. That's not true. It does vary. I know, like my local community foundation, I think you have to have a year of 501(c)(3) status before they will fund you, but that's not across the board. Every organization is different. And if you're trying to get money right away and you don't have whatever you need for some reason to write a grant application, or, do a GoFundMe. do a fundraiser on Facebook, right? Like work with your local businesses, see if they'll like help you advertise. Like there's so many, there's so many tips and tricks, and definitely Candid. That link is going to help you find a lot of those, you know, webinars or workshops to like overall nonprofit development, not just grant writing.
Thank you. And 2 questions, and then we'll move over to Cliff. So Jennifer, your question?
Hopefully you can hear me. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I have this new speaker thing, so I don't know how it works. But anyway, I work for a tribe in Nice, and I'm a housing specialist here, not quite the director yet. So grant writing isn't my thing, but I'm looking into the grant writing because I want to do the grant writing for the tribe. Now you were saying get yourself out there, you know, do your social networking, but with tribal, it's pretty much government grant, federal grant. So is that something where I still need to do the, what did you call it? The networking, the fundraising kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, foundations make grants to tribes as well. So you definitely want to do research in that area. And what I meant by that, I mean, I know I kind of like derailed myself. I can't help it. I can't help it when I talk about fundraising. I just want to tell you everything I know. So when I meant by that, as far as like make sure people know who you are, make sure your local community foundation knows who you are. And I'm in Mendocino, you're in Lakeport, right? Is that
Yes.
Nice? Okay,
Yes.
cool. Yeah. So for instance, our community foundation supports tribes. You know, they will make grants to tribes. So that's what I meant by like, make sure they know who you are. Make sure the foundations that support the work that you do in your area, make sure they know who you are, especially the local foundations. That's what I meant by that. I want them to know who I am. And then I just derailed and told you like a whole bunch of other stuff that may not
It's
might
okay.
have
It's
confused
okay.
you, and I apologize for that.
No, it's really awesome information, especially for new people that are coming in. It is overwhelming. I personally don't take it as overwhelming because I love knowledge is power. And this is giving a lot of power to people that are starting out and I'm an A-type personality. So meeting and greeting and social networking for me is like, just throw me in a room and let me meet everybody. But the beginning stages of it all as to where to start, how to start, what to do, with who, where, you've given us a substantial amount of information. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and thank you for the gratitude. Yeah, I don't know if Lake County has a foundation, but if I were you, I'd call it Mendocino Community Foundation and ask them. They're super helpful. They may have,
Okay.
they probably know what's going on over there. And yeah, you know, you can always hire a grant writer, right? Like that's a thing, but oftentimes the people that need that the most have no money. And that's kind of the irony of that. What I would suggest is if you only have a limited amount of money, hire a grant writer or a writer to build your case statement or to build your needs statement, right? And then you can repurpose that and kind of figure it out as you go. So if I had a very limited budget, that's what I would invest in if I didn't have a strong writer at my organization.
Well,
that could
and
help.
that's what I want to do is I want to be the grant writer. So I want to be that person that can solidify what the tribe needs and the reasons behind what they need and why. And I want to be that person. So I would love to go to schooling for it. And I'm actually checking into the grant writing schooling. So because that's empowerment to me to be able to offer that to my tribe. So yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I would definitely just suggest use the free resources as much as possible. I've seen really outlandish things that people charge to learn how to grant, right? Like thousands of dollars. I think it's really embarrassing. You know, it's like, it's not all of our skill set, right? Like I was really good at writing essays in school. I was not good at math and science, but when I had to learn math and science and I did it every day, I was okay at it, right? I could pass, I could do well. So, you know, it's something that you can definitely learn. And that's really kind of what I think it is. It's kind of like essay questions. It's essay questions and it's finals. Like every
Gotcha. Okay, good to know. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. And yes, we will be providing additional resources in our follow-up email, so you'll have a lot to dig through and digest. So, and one last question for you, Elizabeth. What current and future funding landscape do you foresee for Mexico, specifically Baja California?
Oh, I'm not super well versed in international funding. I will say that. So yeah, I'm not sure, but do some research if you can, you can find some foundation, research foundations and keywords. Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't have that much awareness of, I don't do so much international work. And when I have looked for grants, it's usually travel grants or it's very specific projects, things like that. I will just say, like, the reason we have so many charities here is because we don't have the government services in America. So in the late 1800s, you saw this huge influx of charities because there's services that the governments in other countries provide, out of taxpayer dollars, or, the budget that we don't have. And so we have a lot of organizations that are doing the work that government does in other countries. I will just say that. And it's interesting. And then they want us to not lobby and change laws, right? So it's kind of this weird, weird position that we're in. So yeah, sorry that I can't help you there, but if I think of anything, I will share it out.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And Myrna Borrego, please connect with our Baja working group where you can meet various individuals who might have other connections. And thank you, Tanaya, for sending that information to them. So thank you, Elizabeth. We will move over to Cliff. Cliff.
Thank you. Wow, that was quite the presentation. Make sure I have it here. A second. Sorry, my share screen's kind of messing up here. I'm getting into it. Here we go. All right, can you guys see that?
It's not in presentation. There you go.
Okay. Mine's gonna be more lecture driven, just to warn you guys. So my name is Clifford Banuelos. I'm the Tribal State Liaison with the Intertribal Council of Nevada. And yeah, grant writing, a lot of the things that Elizabeth was saying, I totally felt what she was saying. She gave you some really good tips regarding the life as a grant writer. So I'm going to touch into federal grants and items we're going to discuss: why apply for a federal grant, locating a federal grant, reading general information and eligibility, registering on grants.gov. That's what I'm going to highlight. There are other federal websites. Grant Solutions comes to mind. They utilize that a lot with the appropriated money from Congress and all those mini grants they had coming out. And I believe Department of Education has their own website. So there's all sorts of different ways to locate a federal grant. But grants.gov is the one that people use most of the time, especially if you're Native American representing a tribe. And I think a lot of the people on here are that. The application package, and then submitting and tracking, and go over that a little bit. So why apply for a grant? Elizabeth covered that pretty good. You should apply based on need, not because there's a lot of money out there and I want it. This happened the last few years with a lot of the congressional money that was appropriated. So much money out there, but a lot of it didn't have personnel. So it's like, well, I can apply for travel or all these different things, but do I have the personnel to manage the grant? And that's something you need to ask yourself. So think about who's going to manage a grant, how much time you would devote to the grant. Will the grant be more of a burden rather than a benefit? And I'll touch upon that. Think about all these things. Even if your bosses see the money or the potential, too often we see the potential, not the reality. As a former grant writer, my tribe would have me focus on these very large grants. And sometimes my heart wasn't in it because we weren't aligning right on some of the things they wanted, but the tribe just saw the money. And I think it's your job as a program manager, grant writer, to have those hard conversations with your authority, whether it's a council, a business council, administrator, about why you think this may not be the right fit or why it's a good fit. So locating a federal grant. Sometimes we hear about a grant through a peer, or maybe someone sends you an email about a grant opportunity. That happens a lot once you're more tenured, or maybe you set yourself up on a listserv, which I strongly recommend. If you go to most federal agencies' websites, USDA is a monolith, so there'll be all sorts of different sub things on USDA, but you can get set up on their listserv, and that way you'll get information regarding grants that are being put out. And for this presentation, we'll assume that you have a need and want to dive into the pool looking for the grant at the bottom of the pool. Sometimes that happens because you're responding to an immediate need that the community or council or board has told you to look for. So that's the way I'm going to look at this. We're in that situation regarding this presentation. And so before you look, Elizabeth went over some of these things. I recommend typing down what you need. Is this a project? Is this a program? You need, do you need construction, contractors, capital equipment, employees? Keep in mind what you need. What is this for? An education program? Is this an environmental project? Is it enhancement to road construction or enhancing an area? Put down a description of the project program because it's easy to get lost in the weeds as you're around the process. Always go back to that. That's the core reason why you're writing the grant, and it's easy to get lost within the framework of the grant, the federal grant restrictions. Put down the budget you want. Is this direct funding? Do you have the capability to match funds if it's a matching grant? And I wrote down a quote from Elizabeth: start with your budget. That's an important thing, I think. If you're kind of trying to figure out your goals and objectives, which I'll touch upon, um, you know, write down your personnel costs, your estimated costs that you need right at the front. That will help you write a more effective grant, I think, a more effective application. It'll be realistic. And for me, working with a lot of Environmental Protection Agency grants, they're really big on full-time equivalent hours, and so am I now. You know, figuring out how many hours you're gonna for each of the personnel as you develop the grant budget and then the work plan. Figure out how many hours the personnel is going to put down to these goals and objectives, and the funding agency may call them something different with EPA's components, commitments, but you're basically working on goals and commitments. I'm sorry, yeah, goals and objectives, and then tasks underneath that. So get this stuff down before you find the grant. Don't let the grant write your program if you don't have to do that. There are core program funding where it's definitive what the grant is, and it's so important you can't turn it down. But if you don't have to do that, don't. And know what your community wants and needs. I would recommend, if you have the time, having planning meetings with the community, having a meeting, a little committee, put it together and kind of gather from them, because you might be surprised what your community thinks. They'd have some really good ideas, I think. And community could be community members, residents. It could be your peers, directors, personnel. But getting a wants and needs. If you have the time, put a little committee together. So putting together a need statement's important as you're doing this. That's basically what I'm saying. Typing down what you need, a project description, and then your goals and objectives. So you'd be looking at, for a new person, I would say no more than 3 goals, 1 to 3 goals. If you're a little more tenured, 5 goals possibly, and then 1 to 5 objectives underneath each of those goals. And underneath that, you're going to have certain tasks you're going to have to do under the objectives. So that's the framework you want to think of when you're doing a program or project. And methods for evaluation would touch upon that. So the granting agency is going to want to know how you're going to gauge whether you're successful or not successful, whether you're staying on schedule. So the methods of evaluation are important, and that's going to be usually within the framework of the grant notification of funding availability and how you measure that. So I just skipped right to it. You just do a Google search for grants.gov, and you'll come to a big main screen, and it'll say grants.gov, someone typing, but they change the main screen all the time. But if you do a Google search and find grants.gov, or just type in grants.gov on your search bar, you'll find it. And underneath that, you'll see on the top there, you'll see search grants. And generally, that's where you're going to go first. You can learn about grants.gov, and I'll get into that too. But this is what the screen looks like when you click the search grants. And if you get a notification from a peer or you're on a listserv, it'll include the opportunity number or CFDA number. That's antiquated, the CFDA number, but as old school people remember the CFDA number, that's how we would search back in the day. And but to the left, you can do a keyword search for it. You can do an opportunity number search, which is right there on the left there. You can do the CFDA number if you have that. And I want to touch upon this screen a little bit because it does have the opportunity number, the title, the agency is important because there's so many grants out there. You can get confused. Is this the right grant? And then a good thing to look at is, it sounds silly, but the posted date and the close date, because sometimes they'll post old, the old grants, and so the close date will be like 2023, and you're like, well, that's definitely not the right one. That's an archived one that's still showing up on the search. So you want to make sure you're looking at the current year close date on the current grant. And so again, I have put down here, there's other websites like Grant Solutions, Department of Education, but the purpose of this, it's just grants.gov I'm focusing on today. And so the next page, on this, I did a search for environmental grants on on the left of the screen. I ticked the box for environment, and I think that's the only search I really did. For Native Americans, I looked for that under Native Americans, because you can look under jurisdictions that are applying, your state, federal, nonprofits, and this I did Native American, and then so this screen came up with a bunch of different grants eligible to Native Americans. And for the purposes of this grant, I want to key on this one, the fiscal year 2024 Tribal Wetlands Program Development Grant. And so you're seeing that grant there. This is what I was looking for. And then you'll see there the opportunity number. And if you click on that opportunity number, it'll go to the screen where you can view the grant opportunity. And you can see on the top here, the opportunity number, the name of the grant, synopsis of the grant, which we're looking at, and I'm going to go over right now. The version history will kind of show you how it kind of how it started. During COVID, we had a lot of grants that started certain ways and ended up a different type of product. But you can see the reason why the grant was put out there when you look at the version history. And related documents, there could be support documents that'd be very helpful to you. And then the package, which I'll get to later on, we'll go back to that and go to that screen. But it's important on the general information, especially if you're grant writing, to notice what type of grant category it is. In this case, it's discretionary, meaning it's a competitive grant. There's other types of grants. There's flow through grants, which Kurt will go into later. That's a lot of state grants or like that type of grant. There are matching grants where maybe you match with 75% of your direct funding and then match with 25% other funding, which can be in kind or other grants. And this is a cooperative agreement, so a contract. That's kind of important because you need to know for your signing authority or your authority, that this means you need someone to sign a contract. And then this is really important as a grant writer. Expected number of awards, 25. So that's 25 awards, and it's a federal grant, meaning federally, 50 states, for tribes, what is it, 580 so tribes. That's a few awards, and right away it's gonna pop in my head. Okay, we're looking at a lot of funding, and in this case, yeah, it's a pretty large estimated total program funding. $3,800,000 is the estimated award. So we're looking at a pretty competitive grant. Probably a lot of the tribes that are built capacity in wetlands are looking forward to this grant, and they've already kind of prepared for it. You've heard the term shovel ready. They're probably ready and done their work. Maybe they applied the previous year, didn't get the award, so this year they really have their ducks in a row because they want to get this grant. And but I'm just using this as an example to read the screen. And so it's a good idea, though. If you see like there's some grants that only have like 2 awards, do you want to apply for that? That's what I'm going to go to right now, the next screen, which is so the eligibility, and this just says others, but it'll say municipalities, cities, city governments, Native American tribes, nonprofits, consortia, tribal consortia. It'll list that other. Right now, it just says others, but you'll see the listing there. You want to make sure you're eligible before you apply for a grant. I have actually done that, wasted a lot of time on a grant and finding out, wait a minute, we weren't eligible. That happens. And description. So it's important to look at the description of the grant because this is what they want, the purpose for the grant. And it's important to see their language that they're using. In this case, Tribal Wetlands Program, that says tribal governments. I'm looking for keywords here that they're using. conserving and restoring wetland acreage and improving wetland condition. So when we're talking about the metrics, ways to gauge whether you're the work you're doing, you're looking at that language, conserving and restoring. You don't want to confuse the funding agency with your own language. Try to identify their language that they're using as metrics. In this case, I would say the law that's creating this is a Clean Water Act, and maybe kind of have a Clean Water Act available to you on the book or Google, and have that available so you understand the Clean Water Act a little bit more regarding wetlands. So that way you're talking the same language as the funding agency. And here's also something that's very important. I don't think a lot of people take advantage of on federal grants. So the grantor contact information, Myra Price in this case, they list her phone number and there's an email there. On a competitive grant, they can't give you any technical assistance, but you can contact them regarding some really basic questions that maybe are on here or on the notification of funding availability that maybe you're not understanding, and they can direct you to where it is on the notification of funding availability, the notice that advertises the grant. So this Myra or someone else in their program or in their area can help you out. And on a non-competitive grant, you can get a lot of help here. And you can also develop a relationship. It's important to develop a relationship with your funding agency, whether it's a foundation, whether it's a federal grant or a state grant. It's important that they know who you are. And so in a way, you are always representing your organization. So acting in a professional and healthy manner, I think, is important to the grant, to you in your grant application process. And so going back a few screens when you're going over those 4 things, and I had package, we went over version history and package. Now I click on package, and this will take you to a screen where you can see the opportunity package ID, and you can see the closing date, opening date, and actions. So on the actions, you'll see preview, and you'll see that you can preview the application, which pretty much is the information on a synopsis, and then you can apply. And so when you click on that to apply, you may find this out. You might find that you can't download the package because you don't have the authorization to do it from your agency, with your employers. So you want to make sure that you are registered to apply for grants. And for the purposes of this presentation, I'm going to assume that you do not. You probably do, but I just want to make sure we cover that. So you want to make sure that your organization is registered with sam.gov. And then, so you register with sam.gov before you apply. I'm going to get into that a little bit. The grants.gov, you'll need to apply for, and you after obtaining an UEI number from sam.gov, then you apply for grants.gov. And then the login.gov affects a lot of different federal agencies where they want you to use their login gov ID. Environmental Protection Agency is one of those, I believe. So on the sam.gov, it's a system for award management. It's a government registry for organizations doing business with the federal government. sam.gov centralizes information about grant recipients and provides a central location for grant recipients to change organizational information. Grant.gov uses sam.gov to establish organization authority and provides a unique identification number. That's a UIE number. Really important that you understand what the UIA number is. And SAM registration must be renewed annually. Once you do it, though, it's pretty easy, and your boss or whoever is the authority will get the email and then just reset it up. This could cause an issue if you have changes in your administration or leadership. And so you as a program manager or as a grant writer, when that happens, make sure that the governing authority understands that you need to change the access for your eBiz point of contact, and your make sure that doesn't affect your EIN number. So first you register with your UIN number, and they assign this long number to you. And then you must designate a e-business point of contact. Your organization has to do that. And that is the big wig for your organization on grants.gov to give authority to who can apply for grants and who cannot. And it takes 7 business days to fully complete the registration process. And it may require a notarized letter from your organization So make sure you have that in the back of your head. So don't wait for the last second to apply for a grant and find out, oh my God, I got to do all this stuff, because it has stopped organizations from applying for grants, because the deadlines on some grants is the deadline. So make sure you're aware of this stuff. And the purposes of this is, we were having issues 10 so years ago where people would leave organizations but use the same UI tax ID number, and say they were working for the organization and then apply for grants on their own. So unfortunately, that is a reason for this happening, that people are committing fraud. So after obtaining the UEI number for the organization from sam.gov, you must return to grants.gov and continue the registration. There's no fee. Your organization point of contact will be your eBiz point of contact. And so you create the grants.gov account with the same email address that used in sam.gov. And then your eBiz point of contact, and you add a profile with grants.gov using the UIA number from sam.gov. The eBiz point of contact can delegate administrative roles to other users. For instance, maybe one person can only download applications. Maybe someone like secretary, administrative assistant can download applications, but they can't submit it. Maybe another person, maybe the program manager, can fill out the forms and send in the application, but you don't have approval. So you need to know your assigned administrative role. If you think that you need to have the ability to approve, you need to sell that to your authority for your agency, for your organization. And grants.gov has a page that goes over the process and phases. It reads pretty well. So a flow chart on how this works. And it sounds like an undertaking, and it is. It is. Login.gov is a secure sign-in service used by the public. I actually had to use it this morning because it's been forever since I went to grants.gov. And so your participating agencies will use that. When you go to the main page, when you type in your password to get in grants.gov, it'll take you to a main page where it has like 3 different authorities. There's 3 different ones to log into grants.gov, or maybe you can just log in with the grants.gov. It's some federal agencies are just doing it differently. One of the problems with the agencies are all getting their silos, and they do things differently. So I wanted to touch upon that because it caused a lot of problems during COVID. They changed the process of the identification number during COVID, and it created a disaster nationwide. Not the wisest decision. So going back a little bit, so on the top of there, you find, so you get in there, and now you clicked on and you get to this page, which is showing the package of the what's in the application package. And in this case, you have mandatory forms, application federal assistance, the SF 424, budget information for non-construction programs, the EPA form 4700. I didn't look up what that is. It's probably what is that one? Well, mine's not working right now on that. EPA key contacts form and project narrative form. And these are all important forms. And so make sure you know all the needed forms. For instance, maybe they want an indirect cost rate letter, or maybe an organizational chart, or other documents not listed. So when you call that number, you can make sure with the rep for the agency whether all the right forms are in the mandatory forms, or whether there are other optional forms that maybe they messed up on, because they do. It's common for them to go, oops, we should have put that on optional forms. It's not in there. So that way you bypass stalling the application process once you submit the application. So it's a good idea to know what forms, and also what they need in there, whether they need maps or anything else. So you click on that, and you have to open up a workspace. Now they changed this recently. I love Workspace. So when you go to Workspace, it's going to give you certain access to look at all your grant applications at one time. If you're a grant writer, it's useful. You can have 3, 4, 5 grants on your Workspace, and you could click on the one that you're managing, and they may be at different steps on the application process. So it's nice to have it if you have one ID number for yourself and that you're doing multiple grants. And so that you can set for basic, intermediate, advanced. This is usually all set up when you're doing the UEI number and your eBiz point of contact. Your eBiz point of contact will set this all up. So usually Pretty much everybody here is going to have advanced. Maybe some of the nonprofits might have intermediate, but most organizations are using the advanced for workspace. And so you get into workspace, and this is kind of what it looks like, where it says results and workspace ID. You would normally see 2 or 3 different grants underneath there that are open or just submitted. Right now it's blank. I just kind of copied one from another program here at Intertribal Council. And so you see the funding opportunity number, all this stuff, workspace status, new, in progress, ready for submission, submitted, archived. Archived, for some reason, they have problems with. It doesn't show it sometimes. It can be like a grant you did 2 months ago, and I notice it's not showing an archive. So you have to type in the actual grant opportunity number, then you'll locate it on Workspace here. It'll show up on the bottom there of the screen, where under Workplace Space ID, you'll see the grant. It'll be a different colored grant as you do that. And so I'm going to go back to this later in here, but this is just what it looks like when you're submitting the forms. So this is the application for federal assistance, SF424. It's included in package with a package, disclosure of lobbying activities. That was what I was trying to figure out in my head. And on the right here, this is really important. I'm going to go over this a little bit. You'll see the actions, which are lock, download, upload, reuse, and web form. The first 4 all linked. Web form's a little different. And so lock, download, upload, reuse. The more you do this, the easier it'll get. And then it's once you submit the application, you'll see the form status where everything's passed. And I don't know of anybody that can successfully not fill out the form correctly and have it pass. They're pretty good about that. Normally it won't pass. I've never heard or seen of something not pass. And I may be speaking French here, but I'm going to get into that right now. So if you have never filled out an SF424, ask a peer for a copy of a completed form. There are many forms in the SF42 family. Make sure you have all the mandatory forms completed. The budget lines on the SF44 will be different than your internal budget lines. It varies per organization. Make sure you coordinate with your finance team on where certain lines go, such as health insurance. Maybe they have it under fridge, but maybe they want to separate it out. It varies per organization. Utility costs, that may be under other costs. But iron that stuff out with your finance department. I didn't make a copy of the SF424. I didn't want to get into that because that's a whole nother conversation. But make sure your fringe costs are correct. That is normally your UI, your unemployment insurance, your federal reporting, state reporting. All that is under fridge. So make sure your organization agrees with the funding agency about direct and indirect costs also, because on the SF424 it'll compile your direct costs and then it'll compile your indirect costs. And for most organizations and most funding agencies, capital purchases, large purchases over $10,000 normally would be under something that's not covered by indirect costs, and also contractual may not be covered under indirect costs. So when it's figuring out the indirect, you'll have direct costs, and then you have the equipment, capital purchases, and the contractual separated out. So 3 categories, and then indirect would be a percentage based on your direct costs. That's why I say I don't want to go to the SF424 right now that much. Attached documents like maps, letters of support, resolutions, other things in either the project narrative form, the SF424. You can ask your funding agency. I found people say different things for different agencies. USDA wants it somewhere, EPA wants it somewhere else. So some of them don't have the narrative form too as a non-mandatory form. So you have to attach it to the SF424 main form, or I think it's a main one, not non-construction. And know when you can get the required signatures or other documents like resolutions of support during this process. So when you're first looking at the grant, figure out in your head right away the approval process for your organization. Do they have to have a meeting to approve this application? Will the meeting be in time for the deadline? If it's not in time for the deadline, but you feel that this is the grant you need to apply for, then you need to let the funding agency know it's going to come in late, and organize something with them where you can send in that that document showing that it was approved by the authority. This happens a lot with tribes that maybe only meet 4 times a year. maybe once a month, because some of these grants come out, there's only 2 weeks to the deadline from the notification. So make sure you have all that stuff in your head, because it's going to affect your stress level when you're applying for the grant. It sounds silly, but that comes up. All right. So when you download the forms on your workspace, you can either use the web forms version of the forms or download the forms. Do not use your file form. So if your predecessor or yourself, you have, oh, I got SF424s in my computer, I can use those. Don't do that. Maybe you can do that, but you're complicating a process that's pretty easy on grants.gov. So going back to that page, you will need to unlock the forms to download them or complete them. After you complete them, you lock the form back up. So I want to go back to that a little bit. So when you basically lock the form, download the form, and then you fill it out and then lock it. So, or you can upload it. You download or upload it, and then reuse is I think for a form that you did differently. But so you need to unlock it. I think there's an unlock option not in here. You need to download it and unlock it, and then once you fill it out, you'll lock it up, and that's what it'll say when it'll say it passed. And it sounds like gibberish right now, but you'll see when you do the application. So you will need to do that, and then you cannot leave an incomplete form. It won't let you. So once you fill out a form, it'll do a check for you to make sure that everything's correct, and then it'll say, yeah, it passed, and then you can submit it. And then you on the bottom, on the left of the screen, where it says all this stuff, it'll say passed. And so you might have like 6 forms here in the package, and you want to make sure once you fill out the form, all these say passed, and some of them will say not passed. Maybe you have a meeting, you have to leave and then come back to it, and you don't know where you left off, and this is where you left off. You're like, oh, I didn't get to that one. That one's not passed. And so so after all the forms are complete, you can submit the application on your workspace, notify the eBiz point of contact for your organization that you submitted the form, and then they'll view it, and normally they just approve it. But you should get an email notification once you do that, or once the eBiz point of contact does that. And then you can view the status of the application on grants.gov because it's submitted to the agency. And I often send the grant agency project officer the email showing the application was submitted. That way you have it. This has happened to me when I submitted an application like 11:58 p.m. the night the application is due. That comes up if you're a grant writer. So going back to some of the things here, this letter of intent letter is important. So often the funding agency will request a letter of intent interest on the grant proposal before you apply for the grant. This is to help determine how many applicants there will be for the grant, and for them to weed out applicants that don't fit their criteria. Open with a contact person's name and title, followed by the funding source, city, street. Greet the contact person with dear, plus their title. I would say be professional, respectful, play it safe. Keep the first paragraph short and focused. Start by introducing your organization and yourself, and give your job title. Get to the point. Clear and concise language is important when writing these things. Tell the funder that your organization needs it, or why your organization needs a grant. Write a couple of sentences about what your organization does related to the project or program. Write a second paragraph that's brief and to the point. Include no more than 3 sentences stating your organization's structure, status, and the date it was founded. Maybe brag a little bit about it in a short, concise way. Then tell the funder your organization's purpose and how it aligns with your funder's mission or funding priority. And wrap up your cover letter with a summarizing paragraph. Share a closing thought or reflection about what this funding partnership can mean for the future of your project's target or audience. And again, this varies per grant. On a very competitive grant, it helps you to be a wordsmith. It helps for you to write this letter and have a peer of peers look over to see if this is a letter you think they would understand, whether you're being where it comes off as fake or too contrived, too pretentious. Get an opinion of 1 or 2 other people. And then use a professional closing. Make sure your chairperson or whoever is in charge to sign documents. Contracts is a good way. Think in terms of who can sign the contracts. have that person sign it with name and title. Even though you did all the work, make sure it's signed by those people, not you, unless they've given you that authority, which I would not want as a grant writer. So kind of, I just want to give a quick thing on what a letter looks like. It's a basic letter. Dear Miss Atwater, this one was regarding an education grant. Just got it off the internet, so it's public information. Just making, something, introducing yourself, saying you're looking forward to partnering with them. Describing your organization and how you align with them. They did this in the opening paragraph. That's fine. Maybe describe recent things that happened regarding this type of program. And then you can, on certain grants, you can put down the amount that you're seeking. On a lot of federal grants, I wouldn't limit myself, because then they're going to look at it as that's how much you want, and then that's what you're going to get. So it's always good to ask for more, I think. And an appreciation, blah, 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 and sign. Just straight to the point. I would say no more than 1 page. You could also include, if it's a very competitive grant during this, letters of support, or maybe include some pictures. Some things that Elizabeth talked about include the success stories regarding a type of project like this. Look to see what other people have done. I'm going to touch into that a little bit. But when you're applying for a grant, make sure your values align, and that's what people have been talking about. Framing your project within, make sure you have grant alignment. That's important. Does a grant match the existing program? So is it going to fit into within your program? Who's going to manage this? Is your program or another program going to do it? Community impact on personnel. Are you giving more work to your personnel that maybe they don't want? Always know how much reporting they require quarterly. Do they want quarterly deliverables? Financial drawdowns? How often do they want to do them? Kind of get that idea before you're applying for the grant. Any partners? Look for letters of support. So it's good for larger grants, especially looking for letters of support or people you can partner with that'll help your application on the scoring of it if it's a competitive grant. And then peer review from some of these partners, have them look it over before you send in the application. When you do your narrative, have them look it over. If you're feeling like I don't want to share it, there's things in there that I don't really want to share until I submit it, that means there's something wrong with the application. It should be able to withstand peer review. Know your audience, connect with the agency contacts. So again, that's why I say use their language. With federal agencies, they just love their own language. They love the word robust. I always make fun of them on that. Connect with the agency contacts. Let them know who you are. It does help you. Look for examples of previous awards. Some people will list the previous awards. They like bragging about what they did. Good, that's helping me. I can see what they approved last year or the year before. See if you know any of the previous, current, or grantees of them. Maybe contact them if you know them and go like, hey, I saw you applied. What did you run into? Get an idea. If it's competitive, they'll be limited on what they're going to really help you with, unless they're not competing for that grant anymore. But all this information can help you. So in summary, the more grant applications you do, the better you will get. I recommend knowing how the application will be scored if it's a competitive grant. Ask if you can get a copy of the reviewed application. So if you weren't awarded, that can still help you fix your mistakes and get better as a grant writer. And Elizabeth's touched upon this a little bit. You should award yourself for completing the grant application. I mean, these are my babies. You've done a good job. Sometimes you're alone there by yourself doing it, and you walk out there and feel like, man, people don't really appreciate the work I'm doing. So award yourself. Go out, get ice cream. If you have a partner, kind of brag to them, and it's good for your mental wellness. Because this is hard work, and it really hurts when you don't get the award. But then you have to think, and it's kind of the thing, you fall down and you get back up, and you can utilize, man, I was so close on the scoring. Let me see what I can fix, and maybe find another grant writer, and they might go, oh, why'd you do it this way? Do it this way. Be open to that type of criticism. It'll help you as a grant writer. It's not really criticism, it's constructive criticism. But that's kind of just the gist I wanted to go into. I do want to touch upon building healthy relationships. So all these things, their partners, the agency, other people that are in the peripheral, these are relationships you will need to manage the grant, or whoever's going to manage the grant. Build those healthy relationships with them. It's going to help you get street cred, as Elizabeth said. I'm stealing a lot of stuff from her, but you want that street cred. you want people to trust you. You want to make them understand that you have ethics and that when you promise something, you're going to do it. And when you don't promise something, you're being professional and saying, I can't do that. That's okay. That's healthy if you're giving yourself work you can't do. And then I just want to touch upon other, this is just grants.gov application package. There are other federal agencies, USDA comes to mind, where they have their own application packages, which may be like 120 pages of forms, but not much of a narrative, but it varies per agency, but most federal agencies require an SF 424. And I think that's it. Thank you, Banuelos. Any questions?
Awesome. Thank you, Cliff. I'm working on a proposal right now, so I get ice cream at the end of this week.
Oh, heck yeah.
I do have one question for you that came up, going back to Kelsey Jensen. Do you have to be registered as a nonprofit to apply for government funds?
I actually know the answer to that. The answer is yes. So Intertribal Council of Nevada ran into that problem. And we ran into the problem late on a grant that came in for one of our education programs, because the funding agency required the proof of incorporation. And we were incorporated in 1966, and we lost our articles of incorporation, and it created a problem because before they would make that through the ASAP system, the money available, we needed to iron that out with our bank and with the funding agency. So yeah, you want to make sure you have those things on hand.
Thank you, Cliff. And Kelsey, did you have another question?
Yeah, and you register through the IRS, correct? Or how do you
register as a nonprofit?
Yeah.
I do not know the answer. My boss is probably glaring at me going, we had a meeting about that. I'm going to guess at IRS, but
IRS?
yeah, I don't know for sure.
All right, and if we have an answer to that, we can also private message you, Kelsey. And we will know all these questions and put together an FAQ, so you always have reference to the answers.
Oh, and I'm sorry, Kurt. I was trying to watch my time, and now I see the time. Oh my God.
You're good. We're here to learn, and this is being recorded, so we can always come back to this if you do have to log off at a certain time. So yeah, we will go over to Kurt, and he will be sharing with us on state funding.
Let's see here. All right. Let's see what is going on here with this. All right. Can you see my slideshow?
Yes.
Perfect. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about has been kind of covered by our previous speakers, but I think not in exactly the same way. So I'm going to try to do my best to hit the bullet points that are kind of important for state funding. State funding is similar to federal funding, with an asterisk in that it is oftentimes more complicated because there's so many state agencies, which I'll get into, and you'll see what I mean. And each state is going to vary on how their funding works. So I work in California. That's where I've been working, for the last 15 years. So I'm coming from a California perspective, but I'll talk about how you can carry that over to other states. So I just want to start with this first slide and talk about, so first things when you get into the state funding, think about fiscal year. So here we're talking July 1st to June 30th. What that means is that's your financial fiscal year. So consider that when you're doing reports are going to be due, where the funding has to be spent, and then also when the funding is probably going to come available. So put that in the back of your mind. State funding is oftentimes smaller or slightly smaller than federal funding, but sometimes larger than your foundational funding, depending. State funding could be as small as like $1,000, but generally speaking, it's going to be 50-ish thousand to maybe 500,000, whereas federal funding can be the multi-millions. Certain projects often have state funding focus. So if you think about like community development, housing, education, transportation, that's going to be really state focused versus federal. There might be federal dollars for that, but you're really going to have to look to the state for a lot of that kind of funding. And the reporting requirements are going to vary wildly by agency. Something to think about up close, depending on state and state agency. So reporting requirements can be all over the board, whereas federal, sometimes it's more across the board, similar reporting requirements. And state funding can sometimes, I say sometimes because it all depends on a lot of things, move a little quicker than federal from proposal submittal to notification. An example, FEMA funding could take years. State funding, usually it has to move because there's those yearly things happening. Each state will have a focus depending on the governor, party in power, et cetera, which can be beneficial or detrimental to your organization, what you're trying to do. Right now in California, 30 by 30 is a big thing where they're trying to conserve 30% of California by 2030. So there's a lot of environmental funds around that. And if you're in a different state, looking to see what the focus is, you can get on your governor's email list, your local representative's email list, and you can kind of see what the funding focus is. And then you'll know, like in the next, if you have a Republican governor who's really into law enforcement, there might be more money for your local law enforcement, et cetera, kind of know what's coming down the pipe. Each state is going to have an equivalent department. And what I mean is, so in California, we have Caltrans for roads. If you're in Ohio, you've got ODOT. If CDFW here, if you're in Arizona Fish and Game Department, right? So if you think about changing states, or if you have an agency that serves different states and you can get different pots of funding, if you know like California and you're suddenly in a different state, you can go, okay, well, I know CPUC is the Public Utilities Commission. What's the equivalent in Michigan? Oh, it's the Michigan Public Services Commission. So there are some things, obviously, like a coastal agency is not going to be in the middle of the country, but most of these things can kind of carry over. So what I'm talking about here can usually expand broadly. And if you're working in different states and you move states, you're still going to be able to locate this funding. Now, most states, or at least all states I've seen, will have some kind of clearinghouse. It might not be the easiest to use, but if you can find your state's grant portal, grant clearinghouse, if you start there, you can start searching. Cliff talked about the federal. It's very similar to like grants.gov, at least in California. I think California, it's actually through like the state libraries or something. But either way, this is what the portal would look like. So you can go here and you can start searching around. It gives you an idea of like what your state's portal is going to look like. It's probably, depending on your state, very similar. But this is a good place to start. But it's not the only place to start, because sometimes it's not the easiest to use or the best place to find up and coming funding. It's only the funding that is already out there. Now, when we're talking about a state like California, or probably Texas, Florida, New York, these larger states, there's tons of agencies. So it can be really, really tough to find what you're looking for as far as the funding, because there's just so many agencies. So it can get overwhelming. I mean, this is just the letter A and getting into B for California. So, I don't know, it's like 100 agencies in California. Not all of them are going to apply to like a tribal organization, a nonprofit, et cetera. Because there's some really specific agencies, but it can get overwhelming. But don't get overwhelmed. Think about what your needs are, what your organization is. I work for tribal government, so you can kind of weed out certain things and certain things you're going to be able to get funding for or work with. So once you get in here, Cliff talked about some of this, but I'm going to talk about some similar stuff on the state level to think about. So when you're searching for some grant funding on your state clearing agency, so here we're looking at a couple of programs. So one's related to tires, right? So things I always kind of look at first is their match. Generally speaking, like a tribal government match is not a requirement, but sometimes there might be a match requirement. Can your organization afford that match is something to consider right off the bat. Some organizations do not have the funding available for a match. If it's tribal, if it's working with underprivileged communities, sometimes the match can be avoided, but something to think about. And then the estimated total funding is something to look at. That doesn't mean that's the funding that you can apply for, but it's the total funding available. So if you see a really low number, that might mean that it's not necessarily worth your chance to apply. If the total funding available is $250,000 and you expect a lot of people to apply, you might go, well, I'm going to wait on this one because I don't think I'm going to be getting this. And then the other thing to really consider is for that funds disbursement. So can you get an advance payment or a reimbursement? And I think this is something a lot of people don't consider right away, especially for these larger grant awards. Can your organization afford to pay up front and then get reimbursed for these projects? If the answer is no, you have to make sure that that agency has the ability to do an advance payment. Sometimes you have to go ahead of time and work out, there's options for these things, but you really have to think ahead of time. Can our agency, especially for larger, grant awards, if it's like $1 million grant and you only have $100,000 cash on hand, can you afford that? If the answer is no, then, step back and reconsider, can I find something where I can get an advance payment or some other way to utilize these funds? And then really for state, the other thing to consider, which comes up a lot, at least in some of the larger states, is county and geographic region. Everything might look great. You might look and say, okay, I'm a tribal government, check. I can apply tribally. It's for water quality, check, perfect. But it's only for the Sacramento River, X, right? So you don't want to go through all of that to apply if you're in San Diego County, because the Sacramento River is not anywhere near me. And sometimes that's just how it is, because the funding is for some very specific kind of projects like dam removal along some kind of river. So it won't apply for another river in the state. Once you kind of open up the grants, Cliff talked about some of this, but I think we really need to think about your scoring criteria when you're going to sit down and write the grants. If you have you kind of say, okay, this looks like a good grant for me, it's from, this state agency, check out the scoring criteria. Especially if you're not an experienced grant writer, sometimes it helps to think about what you need to put into the grant, right? So if some of the scoring criteria says collaboration, make sure there's language in there where it says my tribal government is going to work with this other tribal government or this other agency, etc. So you get those points. Follow along and get as many points as you can in the scoring to ensure your success. And then the other thing to really think about, especially as you're a starting grant writer, is, am I ineligible? Cliff mentioned this. We talked about this. Elizabeth talked about this. Like, are there projects or things that are not eligible? And this comes up a lot. And sometimes it's very frustrating, especially working in a tribal community, where sometimes it's dependent on income-based need. And it might be for underserved communities, but it's income-based underserved communities, where then you hit a wall where it's like, well, I work for an underserved community who really needs these things because it's more rural, etc. But nobody in your community meets that income-based level or something, where so like everybody's ineligible or whatever the thing that makes you ineligible. Make sure the eligibility is there before you even put pen to paper as you're looking through these grants, especially as you start. Once you get into it and you start doing more of these, you'll kind of know, this agency always has a rule where they say, no buildings, or this agency allows for planning documents and construction, whatever it is. But, make sure you know what you're doing. One of the things to consider too is a lot of the states and agencies have specific funding directed towards tribes, indigenous people, or sometimes they'll say disadvantaged communities if you're not, tribal, or environmental justice, some kind of wording, play with the wording, see what's there to get that funding you need. And then there's also the Justice 40 initiative, which depending on the election coming up may change, but right now it's basically an initiative coming from the president that states should be actively engaging with and ensuring that tribes and these underserved communities are getting the funding. And it's what 40% of all overall benefits are going to these underserved communities, marginalized communities. So if it's especially, Cliff mentioned the pass-through funding, the flow-through funding. So that's funding that comes from the federal government and then goes through state agencies. So if any of that funding is especially coming as pass-through funding, and it's not 40% of it's not going to disadvantaged communities, and it falls under that climate, clean energy, affordable housing, push back on the state and say, hey, there's the Justice 40 initiative, 40% of this should be going to these communities. What are you doing about that? And it's okay to sometimes push back, politely push back. to ensure that the funding is going to the right place and to the right people. But just something to think about, make sure the wording's there and you're following how to get the funding you need and using the right wording as you search. As previous speakers talked about networking, when it comes to state, meet tribal liaisons for your agencies, figure out who they are, go to meetings, send an email, say, hey, I'm working for X, Y, Z, and here's what's going on. We might have these upcoming projects. You're the tribal liaison, or you're whatever liaison to what your nonprofit is. Hey, how's it going? And then for like examples for down here, but there's going to be similar groups wherever, go to these meetings. Even if you're an introvert, you can still go to the meetings, sit in and learn some names. Down here, it's like SANDAG, San Diego Association of Governments, right? And then the San Diego Management and Monitor Program are good for meeting some of these agencies, groups, and just maybe sometimes just hearing where funding is. If somebody says, hey, we did this project, here's where the funding came from, take a note and say, okay, they got funding from the Coastal Commission, even though they weren't on the coast, and here's how they did it. That's a great thing to think about, put it in the back of your head, and then maybe reach out and say, hey, I'm interested in doing a similar project, and I heard you funded this project. So I wanted to go through just kind of a summary of something we did here, kind of how it happened, and give you an idea of what you can do and the kind of the steps. So our need here was, we have wildfire, we're in Southern California. So we need to start managing those fuels to prevent wildfire and reduce the chance of it damaging homes and structures and economic centers. So there might be funding for these kind of things on federal and state level. And it just so happens somebody that previously worked here had met with somebody from CAL FIRE who mentioned funding was available for this kind of project. So, here's kind of what our need looked like. Here's a fire on our sacred mountain, Chocla, important mountain to the tribe. And here's the aftermath of that fire, right? It looks like a moonscape burnt up. So the need was there. So the first step, the environmental and the fire department said, we need wildfire protection. So we had a statement of need, right? You can, whatever your statement of need is, this is usually part of a grant. So you think about, what is my statement of need? Here it's, we're experiencing wildfire and climate change, invasive species, roadways, all these things are increasing wildfire risks. Here's our statement of need. You can change your wording, but you want to word it in such a way that your wording matches what a grant funder is asking for. If it's about climate change, make sure you put climate change in there. If it's maybe a state where climate change is a bad word, word it a different way. Make sure you're getting through to the funders. The project idea, right? How are we going to tackle our wildfire issue? We want to get a crew of people to manage the vegetation around homes and install some fuel breaks. So how do we get the funds for that? So CAL FIRE is in California. They do a lot of wildfire prevention and a lot of wildfire fighting. So they're a state agency. They have many, many forms online for these grants. They have very stringent grant requirements. That's something to think about. Each agency has different granting requirements. CAL FIRE is very, very strict and very, very painful at times. So some of the reporting rules are tough. So sometimes it could be a tough hurdle for new grant writers or people that have experience, especially on the financial level. Their financial reporting requirements are very strict. So it might not be the best if you're starting out, but if you have a great financial department, it might be a good idea to think about. And they have specific invoicing requirements. So that's kind of, their agency's tougher for that entry level, even if you can write the grant, something to think about. Talk to people who have had these grants. If you know somebody, if you can talk to say, hey, how's the reporting? How's the grant writing? Can I get these funds? So we got the funds, and CAL FIRE can provide large sums of money, but it's not the easiest to get. Well, it's not that hard to get. It's not the easiest to continue with the reporting requirements. We also got some funding from the State Coastal Conservancy. As I mentioned, sometimes you can get funding from an unusual source. So State Coastal Conservancy had some funding for fuel breaks and wildfire prevention. So it's unexpected funding source. So don't just check the agencies that you think might have the funding source. Sometimes you can find agencies that have unusual wording or unusual things that they're going on because they have a certain project or a certain head of the agency that wants to get something done, and that money becomes available. State Coastal Conservancy is much easier to work with on the reporting side than CAL FIRE. So it's something to think about. This is an agency that if you are new to granting, I would say try their wildfire prevention grants if you're near the coast versus CAL FIRE. You still have financial reporting requirements. You still have narrative reporting requirements. We have to tell them what you're doing on a quarterly basis, but it's way less stringent than CAL FIRE. So it's a little bit easier if you have a small office or you're a little inexperienced. So with the state funding, as you're moving along, thinking about this stuff, getting your budget, supplies, equipment costs, hourly rate, hours estimated, fringe rate contractual, other, check the agency for the state, what they actually want for categories. CAL FIRE had some different wonky rules about what the categories are put in there. So read through everything to make sure your categories match what they're putting in there. And here's just a kind of example of kind of the breakdown. And make sure you're estimating hours correctly and really thinking about what your budget's going to be on the start of it, just to make your life easier so you don't have to do a bunch of budget amendments or things down the road. And then once you get to past budget, when you get to your narrative, tell the story of why your organization needs this. If you're a tribe, you're an underserved community, you're a nonprofit, that kind of thing, make it a point to focus on the grant and the scoring, kind of like, insert things like, oak trees are culturally important. Make sure they know why you need this and why it's specifically culturally relevant to you. And part of that's because a lot of these agencies, especially if you're tribal, nonprofit, working with underserved tribal communities, if you're an underserved community, they like that feather in their cap, right? They like to check that off, and they like to say, hey, we're working with tribes. So it can benefit your agency, your government, your tribe to do it, because a lot of these agencies maybe aren't working with tribes or tribal communities or underserved communities, et cetera. So if you can tell them, if you need the money and you can tell them, hey, this is who we are, and tell them the story, you might be more likely to get that funding just because they haven't worked with those kind of groups in the past. Check to see if you need a resolution through your tribe or your organization, or if the grant calls for it, letters of support, of course, and then know your deliverables beforehand. Don't get in over your head, and make sure your deliverables match your scope of work. Don't agree to some giant project when you're only getting $10,000, right? Like, think about how much money am I getting and what is the cost benefit of that money? So here is the result. So we got state funding. We've got guys working on a crew. We're doing roadside fuel breaks. We're doing some pile burning on some brush. So the grant funding came in, and we have multiple years now where we're getting continued grant funding for this project from state agencies. A couple other funding things that came through, and just kind of summarizing like things you can do with state funding. Cal Recycle tire grants. There's alternating years. Sometimes agencies will do this where like they'll have grants for one thing one year, something else another year, and you have to kind of keep looking and knowing what's going on with the cycles. Tire amnesty, tire cleanup rotates. The application process, super easy. The reporting was easy, but the tedious part was tracking the finances and staff time, right? So it could be super easy to get in and then way harder to track all this stuff. CDFW. This was an interesting one because this is another thing that tribes will run into is sovereignty issues with the state. Sometimes there's weird wording in there where the state will say something like, we want unrestricted access to this project location. And the tribes will say, whoa, we're a sovereign nation. We do not want to do that. Sometimes agencies are more than happy to change the wording or allow some changes here and there. Sometimes it's harder. So sometimes it's easier to go through like a partner nonprofit because of the sovereignty issues and agreements. Here we went through the San Luis Rey Watershed Council because of some of these sovereignty issues, and half the work was done on Paula lands, half the work was done off Paula lands. The tribe did end up having to agree to allow CDFW to enter a reservation. However, the CDFW never entered the reservation to check on this project. So, just kind of know what the sovereignty issues may be if you're working tribal government. This came out to be a great project. Got a weather station, some longitudinal landscape. Caltrans is another one that has been pretty smooth. Like the barrier to entry is a little tougher for Caltrans because not anybody can easily get money for roads, right? And you have to know a little bit more technical stuff. So you may have to hire somebody out who knows technical things to help you get those funds, which can be costly. However, this is a good example of an agency that provides funds for a very important thing like a transportation plan with easy reporting, short narrative forms, and it's been very smooth. So this is, an example of an agency where if you're working for a tribal government, small government, and you kind of get into the granting, Caltrans was very easy to work with and very smooth. As I mentioned, the reporting is kind of all over the place with state agencies. Know if you have quarterly reports due or just annual reports due or just an end of grant report due. Yeah, I could go on about reporting variations. They're all over the place. CAL FIRE uses a website. Coastal Conservancy was using emails. Now there's a website. Like there's narrative reports and financial reports. So the narrative report would tell the story of what you did that quarter or that year. And then of course, financial reports. If you're new to this, make sure you keep copies of every single receipt, copy everything in case something comes up and there's questions. You have the receipt and you justify why you spent $10 on a pencil for that grant. Make sure you're ready to justify every single penny spent. And each state agency and state has their own requirements for these things. And one last thing about kind of all this thoughts and funding, reporting. A lot of state agencies that work with tribes or underserved communities often want to promote that they work with you. So know ahead of time and tell them you're willing to or not. And sometimes they will ask you to go to meetings and talk about these things frequently. Sometimes it's a good place to network and find more people to get you more money. And sometimes you don't want to do that because you're fed up with these people. So just know that sometimes, especially if they're very proud that they've worked with a tribe, they're, hey, come to this meeting and talk about this project we did for you. And sometimes you go, nah, I did not enjoy my time working with you, or politely just decline. Or sometimes you say, hey, this project was great. I loved working with you. I'd love to go to this meeting and maybe I can get more funds for future projects and meet other agencies. Just know that that's a definite possibility when it comes to the state that they will ask you to go to meetings. Consider, does the value match the requirements? A $10,000 grant with $100,000 worth of work and reporting is not worth your time. Reach out to the state agencies and offices matching your needs. Even if they don't have money available, just reach out, see if there's somebody there, talk to them. Mistakes and deadlines do not ruin your life. That's something you got to think about when you just start out. Talk to your liaison, talk to the staff. If you make a small error, if you think you're going to miss a deadline, talk to them beforehand. Make sure whoever's in charge of you and your office knows, but it's not going to ruin your life if there's one little deadline missed. Usually, sometimes it can, but make sure you know how to reach out and talk to them and get on a level where you're able to reach out and talk to whoever your liaison or project manager is. And the state is a lot different than federal. The state is often very eager to work with the tribes and underserved communities because they don't as often as certain agencies, but it can be way more tedious because they don't work with tribes and underserved communities. So they don't know that we don't have the capacity to do a lot of this work. So, and then the bad, as I mentioned, some agencies and offices are just not easy to work with no matter what you do. So you just have to understand sometimes in your state, you might have to realize, hey, this is not the agency we want to work with. Many don't understand the needs of tribes, tribal organizations, individuals, small communities. They just might not get it. And you just have to accept that and kind of walk away from future funding. Some make reporting possibly tedious for newbies and small groups. And please push back on that. It's okay to politely push back and say, at the end of your grant reporting cycle, in your narrative or whatever, if there's a place to put, problems or issues, say, hey, this part of it was very hard for my organization because, the financials were too tough, whatever. And then, be aware of any language that may infringe on tribal sovereignty ahead of time. So when you jump in, ask around, be aware, be willing to gently push back when a grant is over and it just did not work. And then states do definitely need to improve funding and working with those people who are not experts in this ahead of time, because it can be tough as a barrier to entry. But there are a lot of agencies and people that are great, and funding that's easy to get, easy to work with. It can provide you with fantastic projects, fantastic results. You just have to find it, meet people, talk to people who have worked with those agencies, know where the funding is, know who the agencies that will work with you and your organization and the kind of person you are for your work, and yeah, go from there.
Thank you, Kurt. I'm gonna put Kurt's contact information in the chat, but did we have any questions for Kurt? The recording of this webinar will be provided in a follow-up email to all those who registered, along with the copy of their presentations, as well as any reference documents that they shared with us to share with you all. And our team at the Climate Science Alliance even put together a beautiful, couple slides presentations, and I didn't even share my screen. So I guess I'll have to use that slide for next time, but you will get a copy of that presentation as well. So be on the lookout for our follow-up emails. Before you all sign off today, please write in some of your feedback, recommendations for future topics, any feedback on any of the presenters. Before you log off today, I initiated the poll on your screen. And again, we thank you all for joining us. Thank you to Elizabeth, Cliff, and Kurt for sharing your knowledge, experience, and time with us. And for those of you who signed on today, for sharing your time with us as well. You could have been anywhere else, but you decided to share this time with us. So we certainly thank you. Make sure to be on the lookout for future opportunities like this, and always stay in touch with us, the Climate Science Alliance. Our website is climatesciencealliance.org. Subscribe to our newsletter. And again, thank you, and we look forward to seeing you in the near future.